Picture this: two police officers stride across a sunny park. One is older, a veteran with a stern, seen-it-all expression. The other is a rookie, looking nervous and eager to please. Their target? A woman sitting alone on a park bench, watching a little boy on the swings. As they get closer, you can feel the tension building. "Ma'am," the older officer barks, his voice slicing through the afternoon air. "We've had reports of suspicious behavior. I need to see some ID. Now." The woman calmly turns her head. She looks from one cop to the other, her expression unreadable. "Suspicious?" she asks, her voice steady. "I'm watching my 7-year-old son. What crime, exactly, am I suspected of committing?" These officers thought they knew what they were seeing. Their own biases filled in the blanks. They saw a black mother, alone, and assumed she was an easy person to intimidate. But they had no idea who they were messing with. They hadn't just picked a fight with a random mom. They had just tried to bully a decorated special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And the worst part for them? She was already on the job, and they were the ones being investigated. Section 1, The Setup, A Day at the Park. Before the confrontation, it was a perfect Saturday. The kind of day you feel like you've earned after a long week. At Oak Creek Park, the air was warm, smelling of fresh-cut grass. Families dotted the lawn on colorful blankets, and the soundtrack was the constant, happy sound of kids laughing. Among them were Maya Johnson and her son, Leo. To anyone watching, they were just another family enjoying the day. Maya watched 7-year-old Leo with a smile as he tried to swing high enough to touch the clouds. Every so often, he'd yell, "Mom, look! Higher!" And she'd always call back, almost, "Sweetheart! You're flying!" They had their routine down. A worn-out dinosaur book sat on the bench next to a bag of apple slices. Maya wasn't scrolling on her phone or lost in a podcast. Her attention was focused completely on her son. She was just a mom, soaking in a perfect, fleeting moment of childhood. This park, this whole town, was supposed to be their safe haven. Maya had moved to Oak Creek 6 months ago for the good schools and quiet streets. She wanted Leo to have a backyard, to ride his bike, to play in a park where the biggest dangers were supposed to be scraped knees and grass stains. Anyone who glanced her way would have just seen a well-dressed woman who fit right in. They wouldn't have seen the years of intense training at Quantico. They couldn't have guessed at the steel resolve she'd built during high-stakes investigations, or the analytical mind that was always observing and assessing. They just saw a black mother, alone. And for some people, that picture, stripped of any real context, is enough to trigger a different kind of assessment, one based on bias, not behavior. A storm was brewing in the idyllic park, and it was heading right for Maya Johnson. Section 2, The Catalyst, The Suspicious Call. Miles away, in a police cruiser, that storm was taking shape in the form of Officer Frank Miller and Officer Ben Davis. Miller was a 20-year veteran of the Oak Creek PD, a guy whose view of the world had hardened into us versus them. He carried himself with a confrontational energy, his eyes holding a cynicism that often soured into suspicion, especially toward anyone who didn't look like him. Next to him, Officer Davis was barely a year out of the academy. He still had that rookie shine, a genuine desire to help people. He looked up to Miller, mistaking the older officer's ingrained prejudice for seasoned wisdom, and was desperate to prove himself. The radio crackled. Unit 7, we have a call from a citizen at Oak Creek Park. Reports of a suspicious individual. A female, black, sitting alone near the playground. Caller says she seems out of place. Miller let out a little smirk. Out of place, he said, glancing at Davis. I wonder what that's code for. Probably a drug deal, using the kid as a cover. Or maybe she's scoping out purses to snatch. They get bold. Davis shifted in his seat. A mom at a park, Frank? Seems like a stretch. Could be nothing, kid," Miller grunted, pulling the car onto the road. "Or it could be something. Our job is to find out. You learn fast that suspicious is a gut feeling. And my gut says it's worth checking out. They think we're not watching." That word, "they," just hung in the air. Davis knew exactly who they were. It was the same they from the off-color jokes at the station, the same they Miller blamed for everything. It was a word that strips people of their humanity. This is the poison of implicit bias in policing. It's what turns a mother into a threat and a park bench into a potential crime scene. It's a mental shortcut that puts officers on a path of suspicion based on how someone looks, not what they're doing. Studies on policing have repeatedly shown that stereotypes can cause officers to see harmless behavior as hostile. It's why a white parent on the same bench is seen as attentive, while a black parent gets labeled a loiterer. Miller wasn't just responding to a call, he was responding to a lifetime of bias. The accusation was all the confirmation he needed. As they drove, Miller gave the rookie his lesson. "You gotta be proactive, Ben. You see someone who doesn't belong, you check them out. You establish dominance. Let them know who's in charge." Davis just nodded, trying to ignore the pit in his stomach. He was being taught that his badge was a weapon, not a responsibility. The verdict had already been delivered the moment the dispatcher said, "Black." Now, they were just going to deliver the sentence. Section 3, The Confrontation, Escalation. The second the patrol car stopped, the vibe in the park shifted. Parents pulled their kids a little closer. Officer Miller got out and slammed his door, a small, aggressive act that announced their arrival. They walked right past other families, their eyes locked on Maya. Maya had seen them coming. Years of training meant her situational awareness was always on. She didn't react. She just kept watching Leo, running through a mental checklist. She'd broken no laws. She was in a public park. There was no legal reason for this, but she knew the law isn't always the deciding factor. "Ma'am," Miller said, his voice a command. "We've had reports of suspicious behavior in this area. We need to see some identification. Now." Maya slowly turned and met his gaze. "Suspicious," she repeated calmly. "I'm watching my 7-year-old son play. Tell me, officer, what specific crime am I suspected of committing?" This wasn't the reaction Miller was used to. He expected fear or frantic denials, not a calm, legal question. It knocked him off balance. "Ma'am, I don't have to debate the law with you," he snapped. "We're conducting an investigation. Failure to identify yourself is a crime. Are you giving me your ID, or are we going to have a problem?" "Actually, officer," Maya said, her tone still infuriatingly calm, "for a failure to identify law to apply, you first need lawful grounds to detain me. That means you need reasonable suspicion that I've committed a crime. So, I'll ask again, what crime am I being investigated for? Is watching your child now illegal in Oak Creek?" Davis shuffled his feet. He could feel everyone in the park watching them. He heard Leo call out, "Mom. Who are those men?" The situation was spiraling, and this woman didn't act like any criminal he'd seen in training videos. She was smart, composed, and knew the law better than he did. Miller's face was getting red. He was being challenged, and his authority was being questioned. Her calm confidence felt like an insult. "That's it. You're obstructing," he declared. "You want to play lawyer? You can do it from a holding cell." He stepped closer, his hand drifting toward his handcuffs. "Look, I can make this a lot harder on you. And your son. Think you're providing a stable environment for him right now? Causing a public disturbance? It'd be a real shame if we had to call Child Protective Services." That was the line. The threat against her son. For the first time, Maya's expression changed. It wasn't fear. It was ice. The patient mother disappeared, and something much more intimidating took her place. Her voice lost all its warmth. "You will not threaten my son," she said. It wasn't a request, it was an order. "I'll do whatever it takes to resolve this," Miller shot back, high on his own power. He was in too deep to back down now, with an audience of cell phone cameras fueling his need to win. "You're under arrest. Stand up and put your hands behind your back." He reached out to grab her arm. "Officer," Maya said, her voice low and dangerous. "I'm going to advise you one last time. Do not touch me." He ignored her. His fingers wrapped around her wrist, and in that single moment, he sealed his own fate. The second Miller touched her, the world shifted into slow motion. In one fluid movement, Maya was on her feet. She used his own momentum against him, twisting his arm behind his back in a textbook compliance hold. Pain shot through Miller's shoulder. He was completely immobilized. The whole thing took maybe 2 seconds. It was precise, efficient, and absolutely devastating. Officer Davis just stared, stunned. 1 second his partner was making an arrest, the next he was helpless. Davis's training kicked in a moment too late. He fumbled for his gun, his hands shaking. "Let him go. Get on the ground," he yelled, his voice cracking. The park went silent, except for Leo's frightened sobs. Maya didn't even flinch at the gun. She held Miller steady with one hand and never took her eyes off Davis. Her voice cut through the tension like a razor. "Officer," she said, her tone pure command. "My name is Special Agent Maya Johnson, FBI, badge number 7-2-9-1. Your partner just assaulted a federal officer. You will lower your weapon, holster it, and place your partner in handcuffs. That's a direct and lawful order. Do it now." The words hit the rookie like a ton of bricks. "FBI. Special Agent." Miller, still pinned, sputtered, "She's lying. Cuff her, you idiot." But Maya's authority was unshakable. While holding Miller, she reached into the diaper bag on the bench. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled out a small leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. Inside was a gleaming, golden shield, the seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The sun caught the metal, and it seemed to blaze with an impossible light. "Officer Davis," Maya said again, softening her voice just a bit to de-escalate. "Confirm my credentials. Then follow my order. The longer you point that weapon at me, the worse this gets for you." Davis's eyes darted from the badge to Maya's face to his partner. The world had turned upside down. The suspicious woman was a federal agent who could take down a cop twice her size without breaking a sweat. His career, maybe even his freedom, hung in the balance. Section 5, The Aftermath, the fallout begins. The sight of that FBI shield was like a bucket of ice water on Davis's panic. His arms trembled. Miller was still yelling, "It's fake," but there was no conviction in his voice. The truth was radiating off Maya like heat. Slowly, Davis lowered his weapon and holstered it. "Good decision, officer," Maya said. "Now, cuff your partner." Shaking, Davis cuffed Miller, who had finally stopped struggling and was just sagging in defeat. As soon as he was secured, Maya released him. She then pulled out her own phone. "This is Special Agent Johnson," she said, her voice all business. "Requesting immediate FBI and DOJ Civil Rights Division response to my location, Oak Creek Park. I have 2 local officers, one in custody for assault on a federal officer. The scene is secure." That call changed everything. This wasn't some local issue that could be buried by an internal report. By bringing in the Department of Justice, Maya had just escalated this to a federal civil rights case. Within 10 minutes, the scene looked like something out of a movie. Black sedans and an SUV rolled onto the grass, and agents in suits and tactical vests emerged, creating a secure federal perimeter. The lead agent, a man with graying temples, walked up to Maya. "Agent Johnson. Status?" "This is Officer Frank Miller," Maya said, gesturing to the cuffed cop. "He initiated an unwarranted stop, escalated, threatened my son, and then assaulted me." Officer Davis drew his weapon but stood down after I identified myself. Just then, the Oak Creek police chief, a man named Henderson, arrived, his face flushed with confusion. He'd rushed over expecting to take charge. Instead, he found his park overrun by the FBI. "What in God's name is going on?" he blustered. The FBI agent in charge turned to him, his face a mask of stone. "I'm in charge," he said flatly. "Chief, your officer has assaulted a federal agent. This is now a federal crime scene. Your jurisdiction here is over." Chief Henderson looked from the stone-faced feds to the humiliated Miller, then to Maya, who was now kneeling to comfort her son. The mother was back, but the power she held was unmistakable. The chief realized, with a sinking feeling, that this was much bigger than one bad arrest. He had completely lost control. CTA. This is the moment where it all unravels. What these officers didn't know was that their whole department was already on the FBI's radar. This single, biased encounter was the final piece of evidence needed to blow the lid off years of corruption. Before we get into the shocking details of the investigation they stumbled into, if you find stories of justice and accountability like this compelling, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. Section 6, The Investigation, Uncovering the Rot. The confrontation in the park was no accident. Special Agent Maya Johnson wasn't there by chance. Her move to this town was part of a massive, covert, pattern or practice, investigation by the Department of Justice. For over a year, the DOJ and FBI had been quietly building a case against the Oak Creek Police Department. It started with complaints of racial profiling, traffic stops that overwhelmingly targeted minorities, and excessive force cases that were always swept under the rug. DOJ data analysts found a person of color in Oak Creek was 4 times more likely to be pulled over and 10 times more likely to be searched than a white resident. But numbers weren't enough. They needed to understand the department's culture. That's where Maya came in. As an undercover agent, her job was to live in the community and see how the OCPD operated from a citizen's perspective. Her cover was simple, a single mom looking for a safe place for her son. And officers Miller and Davis walked right into her web. Their actions were a perfect, textbook example of the very pattern the FBI was investigating. Later that night, the interrogations began. Miller was defiant, painting himself as the victim. But his story fell apart against a dozen cell phone videos and a service record filled with complaints from minority citizens. He was facing federal charges, including assault on a federal officer, which can carry a sentence of up to 20 years. Officer Davis was a different story. He was terrified. He broke down and confessed everything about the department's toxic culture. He talked about Miller's laws, unwritten rules about targeting people in certain neighborhoods. His testimony was the inside voice the DOJ needed. In exchange for his cooperation, he was offered a plea deal, but his career was over. The incident in the park was the lit match that set the whole thing off. It was the irrefutable proof of bias the DOJ needed to go public. And the stakes couldn't be higher. Research has consistently shown that black individuals, and particularly black women, face unique and disproportionate risks during police encounters. One study highlighted that black women are 1.4 times more likely to be killed by police than white women, a harrowing statistic that underlines the life-and-death reality of encounters like the one Maya and Leo survived. Section 7, The Consequences, Justice Served. The public fallout was immediate. The videos from the park went viral, and Oak Creek PD became a national symbol of corrupt policing. For Officer Frank Miller, it was the end of the road. He was fired and faced a multi-count federal indictment for assault and deprivation of civil rights. He was convicted and sentenced to a long term in federal prison. Ben Davis, as part of his plea deal, resigned in disgrace. He became the government's star witness, his testimony helping to expose the widespread conspiracy to cover up misconduct. Police Chief Henderson was also forced out. The investigation revealed he was actively complicit in hiding his department's dirty laundry. He retired to avoid facing his own indictment for obstruction of justice. But the biggest change came for the department itself. Armed with overwhelming evidence, the Department of Justice announced their findings and imposed a consent decree. A consent decree is a court-enforced agreement that forces a police department to make sweeping reforms. An independent federal monitor was appointed to oversee the OCPD for years, ensuring changes to their use of force policies, bias training, and accountability systems. The culture that created Frank Miller was finally being torn down and rebuilt under the watchful eye of the federal government. Conclusion. The story that unfolded in Oak Creek Park is a dramatic look at a painful American truth. It's about how prejudice and abused power can turn a peaceful afternoon into a moment of terror. It's a spotlight on racial profiling, where the color of your skin can make you suspicious to the very people sworn to protect you. But it's also a story about accountability. It shows what can happen when a corrupt system collides head-on with a system of justice. In the end, Special Agent Maya Johnson was both the victim and the hero of this story. As a mother, she was put through a humiliating, frightening ordeal. As an agent, she was the tool that brought about a long-overdue reckoning. She represented both the vulnerability so many Black Americans feel and the power needed to force a change. But here's the most important takeaway: it wasn't the gold FBI shield that made Maya Johnson worthy of respect. It was her humanity. The badge was just the tool that forced a broken system to finally confront itself. True justice isn't about what happens when you harass an FBI agent, it's about creating a world where you don't harass a Black mother in the first place. Final CTA. What do you think is the key to real police reform? And what do you think it will take to fix the deep-seated issues this story brings to light? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, we read them. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about the fight for justice.